They say family is supposed to be your safe place, your fortress in a storm. But sometimes, the walls start to crumble from the inside, and you feel invisible, like a ghost haunting the corners of your own life. Last month, I wired $4,000 to cover overdue property taxes on the house everyone assumes belongs to Mom. That money came out of my savings, my paycheck, money I worked long hours for. And not one of them, not even Evelyn, my mother, said, "Thank you." She's the queen of our family castle, wielding her iron fist wrapped in guilt like a scepter. I'm Faye Stanley, 41 years old, senior marketing manager, and the silent backbone holding this fractured family together. Most people see me as the responsible one, the fixer, the reliable adult who keeps everything from falling apart, but who's barely acknowledged. Evelyn has perfected the art of playing the victim. Last week, she called, her voice tight with desperation. "Faye, darling, you simply must cancel your vacation. Family needs you here." I can still hear the undertone. Your plans are selfish. Your happiness is secondary. I smiled, nodded, and dropped the conversation. No argument, no fight, just the familiar sinking feeling that my desires never mattered. I let the daydreams of sun and sand slip away, shelving my hopes because family, Evelyn's family, came first. I'm tired, yes, but I'm also stubborn. There's a secret I keep locked inside, buried beneath years of sacrifices. The deed to the house is in my name, though none of them know it. I haven't used it as a weapon, not yet. For now, I hold on to the hope that maybe things can still get better. But deep down, a prickling doubt crawls under my skin, whispering quietly that the game is changing. Growing up, the lines between love and neglect were blurred into painful confusion. I remember my 9th birthday with a clarity that still stings. Mom handed Lisa a shiny new bike, the kind with a bell and a basket, while I stood clutching a store-bought card. "Maybe next year, Faye," Mom said with a tight smile, barely looking my way. It wasn't just the gift, it was the message wrapped inside those words. Lisa was the golden child, the favored one deserving of everything, while I was invisible, waiting in the shadows. I convinced myself it was just stress, that Mom was going through a rough patch. But that day marked the beginning of a pattern that never broke. At family dinners, Lisa's opinions were treated like gospel, while mine were brushed aside like background noise. When Dad died, the will favored Lisa and Mark with generous portions, while I received only vague promises that never materialized. The sting of that exclusion still lingers like a bruise beneath my skin. Mom's favoritism was no accident. It was calculated, a deliberate sidelining that chipped away at my self-worth. Still, I clung to the hope that one day she'd see me, not as a shadow behind Lisa's spotlight, but as someone worthy of love and recognition. The years turned into decades of quiet sacrifice. 7 years ago, after Dad passed, I took over the $1,500 monthly mortgage payments on the house, even though everyone believed it was Mom's domain. I canceled vacations that I had dreamed of for years, turned down promotions that would have required me to move away from the family, and spent countless weekends fixing things no one else noticed. Leaky faucets, flickering lights, the sagging porch steps. I even loaned Lisa $20,000 to kickstart her business, a loan she never repaid. Daniel, my husband, watched these sacrifices with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Faye, why do you keep giving without getting anything back?" he asked one evening, his eyes searching mine for answers I wasn't ready to give. I told myself my sacrifices were investments in the family's future, a way to maintain fragile peace. Everyone assumed the house belonged to Mom, but legally, it was mine, all mine. This secret power sat dormant in my pocket, a quiet rebellion I wasn't sure how or when to unleash. With Lisa's competitiveness and Mom's controlling nature, the family was a volatile mix. For now, I played peacemaker, the silent glue holding the pieces together. But the weight was growing heavier, and cracks were starting to show. Last Thanksgiving was a turning point I'd replayed in my mind 1,000 times. 47 relatives squeezed into the cramped dining room, laughter and chatter filling the air like a chaotic symphony. I caught Evelyn whispering just loud enough for nearby ears. "I'm not sure Faye really fits in anymore. She's always on the outside looking in." Lisa smirked beside her, and a few cousins chuckled awkwardly, eyes darting between me and Mom. The room's warmth suddenly turned icy, my throat tightening as heat flushed my face. I forced a smile, swallowing the bitterness that rose like bile in my chest. "She's just stressed," I told myself. "This isn't personal." But it was. The words sliced deeper than any knife. When the pumpkin pie was passed around, I quietly declined, saying, "No thanks this year." It was a small act of defiance, a crack in the facade I'd maintained for so long. Still, I sat through the rest of the evening, pretending the sting wasn't real. Something inside me began to unravel that night, a fragile thread loosening in the fabric of my patience. Hope flickered dimly, but it was there, still stubborn, still waiting for a reason to flare. The moment I dared to push back, to resist the narrative Evelyn spun so effortlessly, I should have known it would only sharpen her claws. She took my refusal not as a sign of strength, but as a challenge to her authority, one she was determined to crush. Within days, the atmosphere shifted like a storm rolling in. I started hearing whispers that sounded too pointed to be coincidence. "Faye's always been difficult, too sensitive," one relative said casually on a phone call I overheard. Another remarked, "Maybe she's the one causing all the trouble." It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a deliberate undermining of me, piece by piece. Lisa didn't just stand by, she actively fanned the flames. I caught her in moments where she leaned close to Mark, whispering in his ear with that cold, triumphant smirk I've come to dread. Mark's glances toward me began to carry something unfamiliar, a doubt, a hesitation, like he was choosing sides in a war I hadn't signed up for. I watched helplessly as the family group chat erupted with snide remarks I knew were about me. Invitations I'd once sent with care and anticipation stopped coming my way. Even gatherings I had organized started slipping through my fingers. The silence around me grew louder, suffocating, each ignored invitation a blade twisting deeper. When I confronted Evelyn, I was met with a velvet wall. "You're imagining things, Faye," she said sweetly, her eyes shimmering with a practiced sorrow. "Everyone just loves Lisa more. You're the one making waves." Her voice was calm, but inside, my heart pounded like a frantic drum. The gaslighting was relentless. Suddenly, Daniel, always my anchor, began to waver as well. "Maybe you're overreacting," he said one evening, his eyes clouded with confusion. His doubt cut me deeper than any insult. I found myself second-guessing every interaction, every word I'd spoken. The world I'd tried to build around family support and love started closing in, shrinking until I felt isolated and unseen. My small act of defiance had unleashed a social siege that swallowed me whole. Desperation twisted my gut, but I refused to let the silence win. I arranged a meeting with Mom and Lisa, hoping that sitting down together could mend the growing rift. I prepared my points carefully, my mortgage payments, the late nights at work to cover expenses, my sacrifices for the family's sake. I spoke with a steady voice, trying to pierce through the fog of manipulation. "I just want us to be honest," I said, "to acknowledge what I've done and find a way forward." But the moment I spoke, Evelyn's demeanor shifted. Her eyes welled up with tears, that familiar performance of victimhood flooding the room. "I've done everything for this family," she said, voice trembling, "and you're the one tearing us apart." It was a masterful reversal, peeling the blame away from her and onto me in a heartbeat. Lisa sat beside her, silent but cold, nodding in approval of the narrative Evelyn wove. Even our family mediator, someone I trusted to be impartial, seemed swayed by the tide. "These seem like petty grievances," she said dismissively, casting doubt on my experiences as if they were mere complaints of a sour spirit. I left that room feeling deflated, my honest attempt at peace crashing against a wall of denial and manipulation. Confusion gnawed at me, and with each step away I felt smaller, less real. The divide between us solidified, and I was left to wonder if there was any path back from this abyss. Months passed, and the battle escalated beyond mere whispers and cold shoulders. During my company's award ceremony, a night I had hoped would be a rare moment of pride, my phone rang. It was Daniel, his voice tense and unsure. "Mom sent an email to the family, and your colleagues are CC'd." My stomach lurched as I read the message that scrolled across the screen. Evelyn had crafted a narrative painting me as the villain, neglecting family duties and playing the victim, she wrote. Worse, she had dragged personal details into the public eye, exposing my financial support as bribery to buy love. The betrayal stung like acid. Whispers started circling at work. Friendships strained under the weight of the accusations. A key client, worth thousands, canceled abruptly, claiming doubts about my character. When Daniel showed me Lisa's smug smile after revealing the email, I realized the stakes had shifted. This wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. It was a calculated assault aimed to destroy my reputation and isolate me completely. The warm glow of the award ceremony dimmed beneath a shadow of humiliation and anger. Every glance felt heavier, every word from colleagues tinged with suspicion. The family's betrayal had spilled into every corner of my life, turning my professional and social worlds into battlegrounds. The house I had built with so much effort was crumbling, framed not by my failures, but by their ruthless lies. Yet I was not ready to surrender. Despite the chaos, I reached out again, hoping against hope for a sliver of reconciliation. I offered to meet privately with Mom, laying everything bare. I told her plainly, I need respect, not control. I need honesty. My voice was steady, stripped of anger, laced with raw vulnerability. I was willing to forgive the public smear if it meant we could rebuild trust, if the family could find its way back to something real. But Evelyn's response shattered that fragile hope. Her eyes were cold, devoid of warmth or remorse. "You'll never be part of this family on your terms," she said, voice flat and final. The weight of her words pressed down on me, years of sacrifice crashing into a single, merciless rejection. I sat there, stunned by the clarity of her dismissal, feeling the crushing burden of knowing I had exhausted every avenue. My vulnerability met only cold resistance. The years of being the family's silent strength now felt like chains holding me prisoner. The line had been crossed, the bridge burned, and though part of me ached for what might have been, another part acknowledged the harsh truth. Some wounds are inflicted so deeply that no apology can heal them. The woman who raised me had chosen control over love, power over empathy, and I was left standing in the ruins of what we once called family. The weeks that followed felt like I was sinking into quicksand, each desperate reach only pulling me deeper into isolation. Evelyn, with her venom wrapped in silk, twisted my vulnerabilities into ammunition, tossing rumors that I was unstable, selfish, and a liability to the family. I heard whispers in hallways, caught sideways glances from relatives who once smiled my way. Even Mark, who had been a steady presence in my life, started avoiding my calls, his voice growing distant and strained whenever I managed to catch him on the phone. Invitations to family gatherings stopped arriving altogether. It was as if I had become a ghost in the lives of those I once called kin. Daniel remained my only anchor. His quiet support was the one lifeline I clung to in the growing storm. But even with him, I felt the crushing weight of loneliness wrap around me, tightening until I could barely breathe. The silence of empty rooms and unanswered messages gnawed at my confidence, seeping into the corners of my mind like a slow poison. I found myself questioning everything. Was I imagining this? Maybe I was the problem after all. The nagging self-doubt clawed at me relentlessly. What if I'm the difficult one? The unstable, selfish daughter they say I am. The exhaustion that came from carrying this torment was overwhelming. For the first time in years, the idea of surrender, of giving up on the family I had sacrificed so much for, whispered seductively in my ear. Yet beneath the despair, a small ember smoldered stubbornly. It flickered quietly amid the ashes of my broken trust, refusing to be extinguished. I didn't know how or when it would ignite, but deep inside, something refused to die. Maybe it was pride, or a memory of who I once was before the betrayal seeped in. Maybe it was the hope that this dark night wouldn't last forever. But whatever it was, it kept me from falling completely apart. Even as the walls closed in, I clung to that fragile ember, waiting, watching, and bracing myself for whatever came next. One evening, after another day of unanswered texts and cold shoulders, I sat by the window, the night air sharp against my skin as I stared out at the empty street. The house felt unbearably silent, the absence of laughter and warmth like a wound too raw to bear. My fingers trembled as I reached for my phone again, the screen lighting up with missed calls from Mom and Lisa, calls I refused to answer. What was the point? Every attempt at connection seemed to deepen the chasm. I wrapped my arms around myself, a futile shield against the relentless ache. Maybe I am the problem, I whispered into the darkness, the words tasting bitter and hollow. But even in that moment of despair, the ember inside flickered with stubborn defiance. It was a quiet promise I wasn't ready to break, no matter how deep the isolation, no matter how sharp the pain. Somewhere beneath the bruises of betrayal and neglect, a fierce, unyielding part of me remained intact. I didn't yet know what form it would take, but I knew the fight wasn't over. Not yet. And then, the betrayal came crashing down on me with the force of a hurricane. It was an accident, or maybe careless cruelty. Evelyn forwarded a message meant for Lisa right into my inbox. The subject line alone cut through me like glass. Real family only. I hesitated before opening it, my heart pounding in my chest like a warning drum. There it was. 47 members, everyone but me included. A family group chat, a daily ritual, a digital wall erected to keep me out. I stared at the list, disbelief and fury crashing together in a storm inside me. They had built an entire community that thrived on my exclusion. Unable to stop myself, I dug deeper. That's when I uncovered the real dagger. Lisa and Mom had secretly sold the lake house, the one place I'd poured my money, my sweat, my heart into. The house held memories, late-night repairs, silent hopes for reconciliation. The deed was in my name. They'd sold it without telling me. The sale had brought in $250,000, my inheritance, my security, diverted and vanished in their collusion. The realization hit me like an ice-cold wave, numbing and sharp all at once. It wasn't just betrayal, it was theft, a calculated erasure of everything I'd fought for. I sat motionless, the cold clarity settling in like concrete around my heart. The hopeful daughter who had once sought acceptance, who had begged for just a sliver of love from a fractured family, died that day. In her place stood a woman stripped bare to the bone, seeing her family's true colors: greed, cruelty, and conspiracy. No tears came. The floodgates had shut tight. There was only a silence filled with burning resolve. This was the moment everything shifted. The mask of innocence fell away, revealing a bitter truth that had been beneath the surface all along. I was no longer naive. I was no longer blinded by love or hope. I was wide awake. Sitting in the quiet of my study, the weight of years pressed down on me with relentless force. I pulled out every memory, every sacrifice, every unacknowledged debt I'd carried for this family. The late nights paying the mortgage, the weekends spent fixing what no one else noticed, the loans that were never repaid, the manipulations, the cruel games, the silences that screamed louder than words. Anger that I had buried deep beneath layers of grief and loyalty now rose like a tide, fierce and unrelenting. I refused to be the victim any longer. I was a strategist wronged, a woman who had been played and discarded. "Never again," I whispered to the empty room, the words sharp and cold. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about justice, calculated and inevitable. The house was in my name legally, the mortgage fully paid by me. Their secret sale was not just a betrayal, it was illegal. I held power that they had tried to strip away, power that was undeniable and unassailable. For the first time, I embraced that power fully, not with rage or blind fury, but with the freezing clarity of someone who knows exactly what she must do next. This was no longer about family. It was about setting things right, about standing up for myself when no one else would. That night, Daniel and I sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the quiet space between us. The house felt different now, less like a prison, more like a battlefield waiting to be claimed. "It's time," I said, my voice steady, stripped of the exhaustion that had weighed me down for so long. "I'm going to use the law to protect what's mine and expose their lies." He nodded, his eyes reflecting a mix of support and cautious concern. "I'm with you," he said quietly, "but we need to be careful. This isn't just a family fight anymore." Together, we began to map out a plan. We would consult the family attorney, gather every document, mortgage payments, the deed, the emails, everything. Quietly, methodically, I would assert my rights. Evelyn was the architect of this betrayal, with Lisa as her silent accomplice. They had underestimated me. The family that had shunned me, lied about me, and tried to erase me from their lives would soon learn that crossing me came with a cost they hadn't anticipated. For the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years: strategic clarity. I was no longer reactive or desperate. I was deliberate, focused, and ready. The ember inside me that had flickered so faintly in my darkest moments was now a flame burning fierce and bright, and I was done running from it. Sifting through the stacks of papers with the family attorney felt like opening a Pandora's box I never wanted to touch, yet desperately needed to. Every document, every bank statement, every late-night email, I cataloged it all with a meticulousness born of years of silent sacrifice. The mortgage payments I'd shouldered alone, the steady, unacknowledged bank transfers that kept the household running. The original will, carefully tucked away, revealing the true ownership of assets that Evelyn had tried to blur with her manipulations. But then, as I delved deeper, my stomach tightened with disbelief. Hidden beneath the surface were debts. Massive, concealed. Evelyn had amassed nearly $400,000 in liabilities, disguised behind a web of fabricated invoices and bogus charities. It was a sham, a financial mirage designed to mask her recklessness. The most painful discovery, however, was in Lisa's business accounts. Withdrawals that didn't add up, funneling money to cover those debts, linking mother and sister in a covert dance of deception. It became painfully clear that the family's veneer of stability wasn't just fragile, it was propped up on my relentless financial support. Without me, the mortgage would default, utilities would be cut off, and the house that had become a battleground would crumble. I sat back, the weight of this realization pressing down on me. They needed me far more than I ever needed them. The cold clarity was both liberating and infuriating. For the first time, I saw the family's empire for what it was: a fragile construct built on my silent labor and generosity. "Did you know about any of this?" Daniel's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts when I shared the findings. His eyes, usually so steady, betrayed a mix of shock and disbelief. "No," I whispered. I had no idea they were drowning in lies and debts and using my support as their lifeline. That night, as I lay awake, the quiet hum of the city outside my window felt like a ticking clock. The house was no longer just a home. It was a battlefield waiting to be claimed. I wasn't just the fixer anymore. I was becoming the strategist. The family's dependence on me had become their vulnerability, and I intended to exploit it, not out of spite, but out of necessity. They had weaponized love and loyalty against me for too long. Now, the tables would turn. For the first time in years, the embers of my anger glowed with a fierce, purposeful light. The burden I had carried silently was now a weapon I could wield. Tonight, I vowed, would mark the beginning of a reckoning. In the 2 months that followed, my world became a study in contrast. Outwardly, I was the same dependable Faye, smiling at family dinners, offering warm words, masking the tempest brewing beneath my calm exterior. But behind closed doors, I was methodically dismantling the fragile foundation they believed so secure. I updated property deeds, shifting legal ownership to secure my position. Passwords to joint accounts were changed silently. No alarms sounded, no suspicion stirred. Online banking, utilities, insurance policies. I reasserted control piece by piece, each action deliberate and strategic. Legal notices were drafted with precision, letters poised but not yet sent, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Each night, as I locked my study door, the silence was heavy, but purposeful. This was the calm before the storm. Evelyn and Lisa remained blissfully unaware, their confidence in their dominance blinding them to the subtle shifts beneath their feet. I watched them at family events, their smiles brittle, their glares sometimes slipping behind closed doors, but their armor never breached. They believed their game was still theirs to control. "Everything seems fine," Lisa remarked casually at the last gathering, her tone laced with smugness. I smiled, the warmth genuine but guarded. "Sometimes fine is exactly what it needs to be." Daniel noticed the change in me, the quiet fire smoldering behind my eyes. "You're holding so much in," he said softly one evening, "but I can see you're ready." I nodded, knowing he understood that this was a war of patience. The facade of normalcy was the mask I wore to lull them into complacency. Every smile was a calculated move, every conversation a test of their guards. The storm was coming, they just didn't know it yet, and when it broke, there would be no turning back. One afternoon, as I was sifting through old financial records, a habit I had taken up to ensure nothing slipped through the cracks, I stumbled on something that stopped me cold. Hidden in a dusty folder, buried beneath layers of forged documents, was evidence of a secret collaboration between Evelyn and Lisa. They had siphoned off $100,000 from my trust fund years ago and funneled it into a joint account. That account? It was the financial black hole that covered Evelyn's mounting debts and Lisa's failing business ventures. Their betrayal was no longer subtle. It was open, brazen, and devastating. The signatures on the withdrawal slips were forged, painstakingly crafted to mimic my own. Documents had been manipulated, trust shattered beyond repair. I stared at the pages, the betrayal slicing through me like a knife. My mother and sister, the two people who should have protected me, had conspired against me. The seamless coordination of their attacks, the exclusion, the lies, the theft, now made brutal sense. "Why?" I whispered into the empty room, anger and disbelief crashing over me in waves. "Why did you think you could do this and get away with it?" Daniel looked over my shoulder, eyes wide in shock. "This changes everything. You have proof now." "Yes," I replied, voice steady but cold. "This isn't just about money. It's about trust, betrayal, the whole rotten foundation they built their lives on. And I'm holding the evidence to tear it down." The weight of the discovery transformed my resolve into something sharper, more urgent. No longer was this a personal fight. It was a crusade for justice, for truth, for reclaiming what was stolen, not just from me, but from the integrity of our family. The cracks in their empire were no longer cracks. They were fissures threatening collapse. And I was the one holding the sledgehammer. I began with the most decisive step, withdrawing all financial support. The mortgage payments I once made without question stopped. Insurance premiums lapsed silently under my watch, and utilities were left unpaid as I quietly severed the ties that had bound me financially to their illusions. I sent formal legal notices to both Evelyn and Lisa, letters that outlined the property's true ownership and announced pending litigation over the trust fund fraud. The tone was clinical, devoid of emotion but rich with unassailable facts. The consequences of their actions were no longer whispers behind closed doors. They were official, documented, and unavoidable. At family gatherings, whispers began to ripple like a cold wind, hushed conversations about missed payments and shaken foundations. Yet no one connected the dots to me. I was still the reliable daughter, the woman who kept it all together on the surface. Daniel watched me from across the room, his expression a mixture of awe and concern. He saw the transformation, the shift from silent sufferer to woman in control, and it gave him hope. Evelyn's carefully constructed world started to show its first cracks. Her usual composed facade faltered when bills went unpaid, and threats of litigation arrived at the door. Lisa's smug confidence dimmed, replaced by nervous glances and hurried phone calls behind closed doors. "They don't know what hit them," Daniel whispered to me during one tense moment. And he was right. They had no idea the storm I was about to unleash, only that the ground beneath them was shifting. For the first time in years, I felt the intoxicating power of control, not over them, but over my own fate. The house, the money, the trust, it was all mine. And this was just the beginning. The first moves were made, and the family's fragile illusion was crumbling. I was no longer the victim. I was the force that could no longer be ignored. The day of the family meeting arrived like a storm I had long prepared for, the air thick with unspoken tension. Evelyn had called it under the guise of reconciliation, a heart-to-heart where wounds could be healed. But as I stepped into that too familiar living room, framed by faded portraits of family memories I no longer trusted, I felt calm. Something new and fierce steadied my hands. I wasn't the scared, overlooked daughter anymore. Today, I was the bearer of truth, the one holding the evidence that would shatter their carefully constructed lies. I laid the documents on the polished coffee table. Mortgage statements, forged signatures, bank transfers linking Evelyn and Lisa in their secret alliance. The silence in the room was deafening. Eyes darted from the papers to me, disbelief etched on faces that had once dismissed me like I was invisible. "The house," I began, steady and unwavering, "belongs to me. Every mortgage payment you thought was shared, I paid alone. The trust funds? Stolen, diverted, hidden in plain sight." I watched as color drained from Evelyn's face, as Lisa's smug smirk melted into something unreadable. It was a power reversal nobody saw coming. "I'm done being the invisible one," I said, voice firm but not raised. "No more manipulation. No more lies. This stops now." It was as though I'd flipped a switch. The family's facade crumbled in real time, the polished veneer shattered by cold, undeniable facts. Evelyn's usual victim act faltered, her eyes darting for an escape that didn't exist. Lisa's defenses melted under the weight of evidence, and even the relatives who had taken Evelyn's side found their expressions faltering, caught between loyalty and the truth laid bare before them. I could feel the shift in the room like an electric current. I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I was the rightful owner and protector of the legacy they tried to steal from me. "From this moment forward," I declared, "there will be boundaries. No more guilt trips, no more exclusion. I am here, and I will not be erased." The quiet that followed was not one of submission, but of stunned acceptance. I stood dignified, unshaken, the woman who had carried the family's burdens now claiming her place. The weight on my shoulders lightened as the truth settled like dust in the air, and for the first time, I felt a fierce peace. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Within days, creditors appeared like vultures around Evelyn's crumbling empire, demanding payments she could no longer hide from. Calls and letters piled up, their tone sharp and unforgiving. Lisa found herself under scrutiny for the trust fund fraud, an investigation that peeled back layers of deception I had barely glimpsed before. My phone buzzed relentlessly, pleas from Evelyn, frantic apologies from distant relatives, attempts at rewriting history that I met with a cold, unwavering silence. My resolve did not waver. I had learned to enforce boundaries that no guilt or manipulation could penetrate. Family members who once parroted Evelyn's narrative began whispering in hushed tones, their eyes filled with doubt. The cracks in the victim facade grew wider, exposing the truth to those who had been blinded by years of manipulation. I remained composed, the calm eye in a storm they couldn't control. Each message left unanswered, each call ignored, was a statement. I was no longer the one who would pick up the pieces of their deceit. The fragile illusion of unity shattered irreparably, and Evelyn and Lisa were left isolated in their own web of lies. Their world, once so meticulously controlled, was unraveling, and I stood firm at the center of the storm. Desperation seeped into Evelyn's voice when she finally broke through my silence. "Faye, please, let's talk. We can fix this," she pleaded over the phone, the usual imperious tone replaced by something raw, unsteady. But I was no longer that daughter who sought her approval. "No," I said simply. "Not until there is honesty." Lisa's messages were a mix of guilt and manipulation. "You're tearing us apart," she wrote, but I saw through it. Their last attempts to control me were feeble and transparent. A few family members, those I never expected, reached out, not to defend Evelyn but to apologize. Their words were cautious, heavy with regret. "I didn't know," some said, their voices trembling with the weight of betrayal. I listened, thoughtful and measured, aware that some bridges might be worth crossing carefully, but only on my terms. Evelyn's dominance in the family was fading fast. Her once loyal supporters turned away, unwilling to be her pawns any longer. The Queen of Guilt was no longer untouchable. She was isolated, exposed, and the power she wielded for so long shattered by undeniable truth. But Evelyn was far from defeated. In a last desperate bid, she threatened lawsuits, accusations of defamation hanging in the air like a dark cloud. Lisa tried to pull at my heartstrings, casting herself as the victim of a family divide. "You're destroying everything we built," she insisted, her voice a mix of sorrow and veiled threats. The flying monkeys, those distant relatives she rallied, pressed me to relent, to forgive, to forget. But I was prepared. My legal counsel stood behind every move I'd made. I refused to be drawn into petty battles that served only to prolong the pain. The pressure tactics crumbled against my newfound armor. I recognized the patterns now. They were empty threats and emotional manipulation thinly disguised as family concern. Some relatives, those who had previously taken Evelyn's side, reached out with quiet apologies, acknowledging their part in the silence that enabled the deceit. I considered their words carefully, allowing space for cautious reconciliation, but only within boundaries that protected my peace. Evelyn's influence waned visibly. Her desperate attempts deepened her isolation rather than restoring her power. The matriarch who thrived on control was dethroned, her kingdom reduced to whispers and regret. 6 months later, the rhythm of my life had settled into a new, steadier cadence. The family home, once a battleground of secrets and betrayal, was now firmly under my stewardship. Daniel stood beside me as we managed it together, a partnership built on trust and mutual respect. Evelyn and Lisa were distant figures now, entangled in legal battles that kept them far from the peace I was cultivating. I attended family events selectively, choosing moments carefully and maintaining firm, respectful boundaries. The real family-only chat that once dictated my sense of belonging no longer held power over me. Instead, I had built my own circle, one anchored in honesty, respect, and genuine connection. Reflecting on the journey, I realized it wasn't about revenge or bitterness. It was about reclaiming something far more precious: my dignity. The peace I found wasn't born from others' approval, but from standing firm in truth and refusing to be erased. That quiet victory, hard-won and deeply personal, was more valuable than any inheritance. I had learned that freedom meant knowing your worth and protecting it fiercely. And in that knowledge, I finally found hope.